Okay, welcome back for those that went with us into the break, and a warm welcome to all those that are just joining us from wherever you are watching Morning at NTV, the very first edition of 2025. I'm glad that you are on board, and we do hope that it's going to be a year that is filled with grace as you take on the opportunities that are at hand. I've always spoken about the fact that if you excel at what you do, there is a very high likelihood that you will get the money or the profits that you are pursuing. But ensure that whatever you do is sustainable, because sustainability is key. Many of us do windfall and experiences, and after that, we don't know what's next. 2025 should be a year that you are able to sustain and maintain growth so that you can be a better person. Not the least because it's a political year and the landscape is beginning to take shape. The opposition parties appear to end 2024 with a very clear way of how they want to go at dislodging the national resistance movement, a political coalition, especially after the emergence of new actors within the system, the Democratic Alliance, the Holy Alliance. But as we have seen over the years, the fault lines do appear far more prominent than what opportunities lie within. We are joined on the very first edition this year by Sarah Birete, the Executive Director at the Center for Constitutional Governance. She's a seasoned political analyst and a human rights activist. She also watches a lot of what's happening in the country, and no doubt we'll be looking forward to understanding how she sees what is going to play out from her point of view or advantage. You're most welcome to the program, Sarah.
Thank you, and Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
A Happy New Year to the viewers. And on the sad note, I wish to convey my condolences to Kasasira's family. We've all worked with Kasasira. You know, he was a gentle giant in the investigative journalism community.
That is right.
May he rest in peace.
Okay, that is news that pretty much took everyone aback. Like we always say, we were not ready. But such is the ways of the Lord. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Starting the year 2025, there is a lot to look out for, especially on the political scene. The positioning and the infighting that we have been seeing, especially within the opposition, is one that apparently is geared towards creating some sort of strategic direction towards 2026. The fault lines, like I said in my preamble, are very prominent. I don't know how exactly this time it's going to play out. Of course, we've seen this very familiar script where the opposition says that if we go big as a coalition, then there is a chance. But in the process of coming together, somehow the disintegration becomes almost inevitable. This might be the same thing. Is it a dead end already in the making, or Chris is being overly pessimistic?
Allow me, Chris, start with some key civic education messages.
Yeah.
One is the poster by the Electoral Commission about voter update. The exercise that will start on 25th January and stop on 10th February. Less than a month.
That's right. There's
very little time, and it's important. We have many new voters, about 1.5 million to 2 million new voters. We have so many young people, according to the released census report. People aged 18 to 30 years are 10.8 million. And these are the majority voters, the Gen Zs. We need them to get on the voter register, and we want to encourage them to participate in decisions of choosing who should govern them. But also old voters need to confirm their details, and those who need transfers this is the same transfer window.
Yeah.
So I want to pass on that civic education message. The second message is on the funding of political parties. The Political Parties and Organizations Act under Section 14A provides that in the year of elections, state resources shall be distributed equally to all political parties in Parliament. This has never been done. Each year of election, Finance, Minister of Finance connives or engages in acts to steal state resources for the NRM. So each year of elections, Finance gives a directive that almost 80% of these funds should go to NRM, and they use Clause B of the law on numerical strength. Yet the law says in the year of elections, money should be shared equally among parties in Parliament. So we don't want Minister of Finance or Electoral Commission to make this mistake again by taking 80% of state resources in a year of elections for NRM. And we shall watch that space, including litigation if possible, because this is deliberate fraud.
How, I don't know even how to put this particular question, because I've been taken aback by the fact that this money is supposed to go out equally. And
parties in Parliament, not using numerical.
Meaning, for
strength.
example, what has taken me aback and basically made me speechless is the fact that a party like JMA has one MP, one member of Parliament.
Yes, I think even PPP.
Even PPP.
Yes.
And the National Resistance Movement has more than 250.
Yes, so the purpose of this legislation, it's not me, it's a law.
It's a law that is...
This is the Political Parties and Organizations Act. It's not me, Sarah.
Okay.
Yes. So in this law, the framers of the law thought that in a year of elections, all political parties should be given a chance to mobilize. To mobilize, yeah. Yes, so the sharing of state resources moves away from numerical strength to level the ground for all political parties to compete. And that's the purpose. This law was made by Parliament. If the actors think it is impossible, they need to amend it.
How far back was the enactment?
2010. This is in the 2010 amendment, but it has never been implemented, and this is fraud. Wow. So what's the way forward? You talked about we are sounding alarms so early, but if any division in this year is done, you know, avoiding the equal distribution of parties in Parliament, we are going to court because this is fraud by Minister of Finance and the Electoral Commission.
Let me ask,
distribution of state resources.
Is a party like JMA aware of this, and has there been any intervention on their part?
Yes, especially the president of JMA. Especially the president of JMA, Honorable Asuman Basalirwa, has been vocal on this matter, but they are always ignored. You see, this money is distributed towards nomination. Wow. When MPs try to push back, they are ignored by Minister of Finance that orchestrates this fraud. But for more than now 15 years.
Those are 15 years.
Yes, this clause in the law has been ignored. So if the actors think that it's not necessary, then let them amend and remove this clause.
So what's the timeline to the litigation efforts that you want to embark on?
The litigation that we shall do is to make sure that the people who engage in that fraud are punished personally. They will take personal liability for that action. The Minister for Finance? Whoever approves that money, yes, we shall follow the chain of that money. Whoever touches that money and distributes it in a way that violates the law are the people we are going to drag to court. Interesting development there. We shall be, of course, looking and monitoring how that plays out. But looking at 2025, there are people we must watch and how they are going to
act or what they are going to come up with, especially as they shape up for 2026. I don't want to start with the president, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. It's a given. He will be contesting for presidents, or am I mistaken? Is there any chance that the president will say, no, let somebody else within the National Resistance Movement take it on?
Well, we haven't heard from him, but as per the resolution passed by his party in 2020, I think they endorsed him to contest for 2021 elections and beyond. So I don't think there will be even a conversation in NRM on who the candidate is, because that resolution was open-ended. So unless we hear from him that he's not contesting, which I doubt will happen, he's the flag bearer for the NRM party, endorsed in 2020. Okay. So there will not even be a primary conversation on who the flag bearer for that party is. But going back to your, the post-build of a coalition within the opposition, the opposition is facing three main challenges. One is the key challenge, of course, of the context they're given. One of the opposition leaders, Dr. Kizza Besigye, had his Christmas in prison. Yeah. He is still in prison, facing a military trial that most of us think is unconstitutional, given the two court decisions by the Constitutional Court. Then you have the infiltration of these parties. You can see what is happening in the FDC, which has now divided itself for the second time, because the first time was the General Muntu exit. Now you have the Katonga faction, that is finalizing the registration of their party. So that almost, weakens or writes off the FDC, or at least changes the FDC as we formerly knew it. Then you look at the other parties. There are conversations, there are, some mutual suspicion of the actors. This one is a mole, this one is not a mole. And that is deliberate by the regime. Because you cannot keep yourself in power for 4 decades, going into 5 decades, when you have competition. So it's no wonder that the actors in the system focus on dividing and defranchising the parties, the political parties, to make sure that there is no, viable competition for power. There is also the other element of state resources. I've started with of party resources. I've started with one element of state resources that should not happen again, but also the ability to fundraise and raise money for political programs. The same law that I was quoting, the Political Parties and Organizations Act, limits the money that party can raise from a single donor to 400 million a year. I want to assure you that even us who work in NGOs, you cannot run an NGO with 400 million a year. You cannot. Okay. It's very little money. You can only keep the office open, but with no activities. So when you have a situation, because how many donors does a party get? A party must have a donor that believes in their mission and vision and principles. That is right. So you find that the political party can have 1 or 2 donors. When you limit that to 400 million, it means that this is all the money that the political parties can raise. And this money cannot take them beyond their offices. So that's the biggest challenge of political parties in Uganda, especially the opposition. We don't know how NRM raises its money. First is numerical strength, which gives them about huge advantage. 8 billion each time. There's that one is a huge advantage, but also we are not sure whether they don't encroach on state resources beyond that. No, if that would be down to because you they do their activities. Chankwanzi, I don't think they pay. That is a state leadership institution. I'm sure many young people think that that is an NRM facility. That is a state facility that is used by one party unfairly, and I don't think they pay to the consolidated fund for use of that facility. They also do their activities in State House. So they are either in State House or Changwanzi. And these two are state facilities. And I don't think there is any receipt that they pay for these facilities that belong to Ugandans.
Of course, that's a question and an inquisition that we shall undertake in order to have a very, very clear idea on exactly how these kind of activities go on. But looking at the possibility that the opposition can finally come up with a semblance of a coalition that can bite. When you look at the protestations of the New Democratic Alliance and its top promoter, he prefers to call himself promoter of the Democratic Alliance, it is a case of saying, here I am, I'm giving an option for those that believe that the National Unity Platform does not offer the sufficient momentum for presidency. Here I am. I'm willing to take this on. And that's why he has chosen to refer to the Democratic Alliance as a pressure group, not necessarily a political party, so he can stay within the possibility of saying, I present myself as an option against, say, Robert Kyagulanyi, whose own inabilities in the last session were really very evident. Many are hoping that, for example, his organizational skills can improve and then he can be more coherent, especially on the policy agenda and aspects like that, that define who a leader should be. So the likes of Mathias Mpuuga see this as a very good opportunity to present another option, and that, of course, again, injures the opposition's ability to go against Museveni, because Mathias Mpuuga across the country, for all intent and purposes, has work to do in order to be a candidate that is formidable.
Well, can the opposition unite? We can look briefly at the history of coalitions in this country, starting from Kabakaeka and then the UPC and the recent efforts of TDA, the Democratic Alliance, that was brokered with a, multi-stakeholder engagement, including some members from civil society. So most of these efforts have not delivered the desired results because to form a formidable coalition, you need to have a honest conversation. First of all, you need honest opposition because there is infiltration.
Are you suggesting?
There is infiltration. Okay. That is not a rumor. As a political analyst.
Let me hold you in your tracks there. There are two aspects you must distinguish: infiltration and honesty.
Yes.
You could be dealing with a group that is first dishonest without necessarily suffering the effects of infiltration.
So we have, those are two challenges. We need honest opposition because there are people who are in opposition just score for the ruling party. So the opposition, first of all, is faced with that challenge. Who is the true opposition and who is not? If they cross that hurdle, then they need to have a honest conversation on their strengths and weaknesses. That's where now honesty comes in. Which areas do they have leverage on? Where should they run? Which capacities do they have? And what support in terms of popularity do they command? Once they finish that mathematics, then this is the mathematics that should help them determine who contests for which position. It's possible because for most of the incidences where people have ruled for more than 3 decades, we can look at the Rainbow Coalition in Kenya. We can look at the recent concluded elections in Botswana, where the ruling party was defeated for the first time. The whole opposition came together. We can look at the Gambia, where Yahya Jammeh was defeated. The whole opposition had to come together. In the case of defeating Yahya Jammeh, the person who ran was the head of civil society. He wasn't even a political actor. The stakeholders sat and said, okay, we need a neutral. We need a neutral party, and they chose one of the leaders of civil society to run. I'm not saying this should be the case. If you look at Botswana, it could be the best scenario for Uganda. I don't know. The actors will determine. Okay. Yeah, but for Botswana, the whole opposition had to come together, get funding fronted that, you know, best Harvard lawyer to defeat or to dislodge the ruling party that had been in power for more than 50 years. So unless opposition does this, they will continue to divide their support. They will continue to divide their strength and multiply their weaknesses, giving advantage to the ruling party that is fused with state institutions. So the best fighting chance for the opposition, honest opposition, is a coalition.
Throw some flesh on what appears to be an allegation that you made, that there are those that are working for the national resistance movement within the opposition, away from the general sentiment that we see, where efforts, for example, by the opposition to inch forward are dealt a blow by inability to agree on aspects like strategy and tactics. Do we know, and can we put fingers to individuals maybe who are immersed in this kind of arrangement?
Mention,
or how does it happen? Just give us an idea.
Yeah, I won't mention names on this show.
Okay, that is understandable.
But it's common sense that for a party to keep itself in power for more than 2 decades, you have to have a plan for disorganizing your competitors.
Okay.
And what is this plan? The best plan in politics is to infiltrate your opponent. Even in a simple campaign, if you are running for parliamentary elections, Chris, it would be important that if you're smarter, you have people in each camp of your opponents that gives you information, that gives you strategies before they are implemented. You don't wait for surprises on campaign rally. So it's a normal political operative method. In security matters, it's known as espionage.
Espionage, yeah.
Yes, so it is a normal method. You don't even have to debate about who is doing what. But in our case, we have seen parties falling apart. We have seen people leaving their parties and joining the ruling party, which would be normal. But except in our case, some people first work with the regime for 10 years, then they cross in the 11th year. It is normal for people to cross political lines. But in our case, by the time somebody goes public, they've already worked with the regime, weakening their own parties for 5 years or so, which is very unfortunate. So that's the political context that I'm referring to.
Okay, talking about that particular context offers us the start point when we return from the break. Nobert Mao, the current Minister for Constitutional Affairs, Justice and Constitutional Affairs, has worked closely with the National Resistance Movement. He has had and aired his frustrations on how his objectives in going into the Memorandum of Understanding with the NRM hasn't actually worked as he hoped. I wonder whether he intends to do a cameo and dislodge himself from the government so that he can launch a move for presidency. That, as we look at the likely individuals who will step up ahead of 2026. Do stay with us. When we return from the break, this conversation does continue. I'm glad you're still with us on Morning at NTV. It's the Kickstarter, the very first in the year 2025, and I'm glad that you are on board. It's always a pleasure to have all hands on deck, and we're trying to put our mind and hands to what the political landscape looks like ahead of the 2026 general election. That will be happening in January, so that means 2025 is where all the action is going to be happening in terms of the campaigns and the posturing, as some would love to say it, as the various actors from the government, NRM and opposition do take their positions. And we went into the break. We were talking to Sarah Birete, the Executive Director at the Center for Constitutional Governance. We are now joined on set by Kasim Kamgisha, the Deputy Resident City Commissioner for Wakiso. And of course, he will be sharing with us what he makes of 2025, the hopes, but most importantly, the political opportunities therein. Let me begin with Kasim right away on what 2025 must look like to you. Sorry for the not hijacking, but yes, we want to know, how does the year look like?
Thank you very much, Chris. And, good morning, Uganda. Good morning, viewers, and Happy New Year to everyone watching this morning. My senior sister, Sarah, Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. 2025, of course, will shape, in my view, will shape the outcomes of 2026 general election. Because it is the year where all political parties, because the assumption is they are all democratic, it is the year when all political parties...
The assumption, okay.
Yeah, because we saw some political parties, for example, picking flag bearers without a contestation. So it's a year where all political parties in Uganda that intend to participate in presidential and parliamentary elections shall be choosing flag bearers for their respective positions, presidency, parliament, LC5, and other positions. That means that 2025 shall be a year of vigorous activities, starting from the grassroots to national level, especially for the bigger political parties in the country. Secondly, it is a year where we might see emergence of new political parties on board, and the case in point is where you are seeing PFF and other formations struggling to be registered and of course to have a platform in the politics of our country.
Yeah.
Recently we saw the coming on board of a DA, Democratic Alliance, and we can't rule out the possibility of other political formations and pressure groups coming on board. But also it is a year where you will see the sitting, the incumbents spending lesser time in offices because no one is confident that they are going back to their positions. And therefore, you will see a lot of, I don't want to speculate, but this has been the trend. You will see a lot of absenteeism, for example, in Parliament, because MPs shall be made very busy in their constituencies by the aspirants. Then, of course, you will see a lot of confrontation between state players and political players, because in some areas you don't need a manifesto. You just need to run on the motions of your electorates, especially the urban electorates, and you find yourself voted in Parliament or in any other position. So 2025 will shape the outcomes of the 2026 general election. But also importantly to note is I expect to see a lot of activities, especially from the civil society, because the civil society has been part of the larger non-state players who always inform some political decisions, and I would want to see them especially talk about reforms, constitutional, political, and electoral reforms. But above all, I expect a lot of activity within the Electoral Commission, starting from this month, because we have got people who have attained 18 years and therefore constitutionally eligible to vote and stand for different political positions, but they are not captured within the National Register, which is the basis of their participation in the political landscape. Therefore, I expect to see a lot of activity from the Electoral Commission. And I expect finally to see a lot of dialogue, because we have had elections where there is too much confrontation between security forces and political players. So the expectation of right-thinking Ugandans is that we enhance dialogue. And in this 2024, it set a precedent that in dialogue you can achieve what you want. Because we saw in the last quarter of 2024, we saw the leading political party in opposition, that is NU, we saw it engaging especially the security forces, police, and we had minimal confrontations in areas where they moved for their activities. So the expectation is that we intensify dialogue as a country, because dialogue is part of the broader democracy and participation of all players. So 2026 January, which is when we shall have presidential elections, if nothing changes, shall be determined by whatever happens in 2025, and I expect that Ugandans bring themselves on board to determine the fate of their country for the next 5 years after 2026.
Interesting there, and I believe Sarah does agree entirely with most of what you have posited, and the aspect of dialogue, especially between the actors, the political actors, is very important. There must be some sort of framework upon which that can be conducted that is different from what we've had before, in order for us to believe as a country or as watchers on the sidelines that there's actually going to be fundamental progress. But the other aspect of dialogue is between the state and the actors themselves, especially the confrontation that we have seen in election years. It's more like there are people who are now prepared for the worst. And if you read the latest edition of the East African, Onyango Obo Charles says How Not to Die in 2025, a handbook for East African opposition, or what will be left of it. If you read this article, you will go back home and you might have a second thought about the election process, especially if you are not a seasoned actor. Why? He says the state is ready to clobber. The state is ready to go down on those who threaten anything that is the establishment of the national resistance movement. Dr. Kizza Besigye has already tested this, and he has spent Christmas in prison. Many see his incarceration as politically motivated and nothing related to anything that has been claimed as was during his arrest and subsequent arraigning before the military tribunal. Do you see anything happening less of that, especially with regard to the fear that sentiments like Charles Onyango Obo really kind of brings out? The state is ready to go all out.
You see, when the state fear the people, there is democracy. When the people fear the state, then you know there is anarchy. So what Charles Onyango Obo is saying is that there is anarchy in Uganda. The people should fear the state. How not to die? You must keep away from elections. What's the essence of elections? Elections are meant to be an exercise where the citizens exercise their utmost sovereign right on choosing who should govern them. They are meant to be peaceful, they are meant to be free, fair, and credible. So in a situation, and Charles Onyango Obo is a legendary journalist, in a situation where you have President Museveni, and his most celebrated achievement is security and stability. But 40 years down the road, you have the most senior journalist in the country saying how not to die is to keep away from elections. It's a verdict. One, that the rule of law has completely collapsed in this country, and the opposite of rule of law is anarchy. Two, it's a verdict that the people must fear the state in order to stay alive and must keep away from exercising their sovereign right on who should govern them. Then why do you conduct elections? And Charles Onyango Obo's statement is not far-fetched. We did a pictorial documentary of 2021 elections. The English say a picture is worth a 1,000 words.
Yep.
We just covered pictures from nominations. This is nomination day. Where are the pictures? 2 of the political candidates were arrested. 1 presented at Chambogo, with no shoes. Another, his suit was torn, his nomination suit was torn after nomination. And we went on every day to say, how was day 2 of campaigns? How was day 3? Towards voting, of course on voting day, civil society were arrested. You are aware that the violence did not just stop at the political actors. It extended to the election observers. 28 of our colleagues in custody for 2 nights and reporting to police for 6 months, and later charges dropped with no explanation. So you have this kind of violence, and I'm glad that the NRM person is raising it, the role of security forces in elections. The situation of state capture has led us into a situation where the NRM is using the army as their military wing. So we are losing the character of the national army at a very high rate. Article 208 of the Constitution is very clear. The UPDF must be non-partisan, must be non-political, must be professional, disciplined, and subordinate to civilian authority. But if you look at the conduct of the head of the army, it leaves a lot to be desired. And maybe the head of the army could be communicating to the appointing authority. One, that either he's not fit for the job he's doing or he's not interested.
Oh, that is also very interesting in itself, especially when he came out and offered some bit of plausible deniability. He said...
No, the latest he's saying is going to behead opposition leaders.
He said, and I must quote him, I hope I could get that tweet from the CDF, where he says, have you seen my signature on any of these statements?
But the description of that account, what does it say?
Maybe
this is the account of the CDF.
Of the CDF.
I mean, who is fooling who?
All right, that's quite debatable on its own, but I would like to engage Kasim on the aspects that Sarah has just talked about, security forces, yes. That we no doubt believe that the contestation that is coming is something that we have seen. The deja vu is there, no doubt, but shouldn't we see less confrontation this time round between the security forces and mainly the opposition, who Charles Onyango is advising to seek some insurers, so to speak?
Chris, I have not interacted with senior comrade Onyango Bo, but I have much respect for his knowledge, but it does not make whatever he says an authority, in the sense that he has got his own opinions, which might not be binding, but his entitlement. And therefore, we can't take his statement as absolute truth and authority in that line. However, there is no doubt that in an electoral period, we see, as I said earlier, we see people who want to drive on emotions to win elections, at some point influencing our young people to get involved in violent acts. Because at no point shall you see Chris in his house or in an organized rally being clobbered or being guided on how to conduct himself. Because we must agree that the state has got a cardinal role, and the cardinal role of the state is to facilitate and guide development in every country. And therefore the state must be ready, must be prepared to secure progress of the country and its citizens. Now, where there is an antagonism towards that objective, then the state, any state in the world, cannot sit back and say, we have given up. Because whereas you might be exercising your political right of assembly, for example, you can't assemble in a market. Because in that market there is a woman, there is a man who has gotten a loan from the bank and is struggling to ensure that at the end of the day, he pays that loan. So because the state must facilitate and guide progress and development, it has to curtail you from infringing on the right of this person who is in the market as you exercise your own right. So moving to the period which we are all talking about and which we think collectively it should be the best period in terms of politicking with total peace and calmness, we have to go back on the drawing board and ask ourselves, what should we do as collective players, both state and non-state players? The expectation, in my view, is to see the civil society take a center stage without bias and begin sensitizing the people and the masses on their political roles before, in, and after campaigns. So that when everybody is coming out of their homes, they are aware of their roles and responsibilities vis-a-vis the rights of others. I expect to see the Electoral Commission coming out vigorously to sensitize the masses on their role in the coming period. So that people go out when they have got the outlook of how things should be moving. But also we need to see the politicians, because they are always at the forefront of all this, and sometimes they hide back from reality and let our younger people take the forefront. We expect to see politicians using a language which is quite civil and from both sides of the coin. Not talking about politicians from the opposition or from the ruling government. Collectively, we should be using a language which speaks to civility of our nation, Uganda. Because whatever befalls anyone in Uganda and results into a loss of a life, for example, loss of a property, it is a loss for everyone in our country. So I expect to see state players, non-state players, taking up their roles of sensitizing the masses. Because our young people downtown have not gotten access to the information and the knowledge which we have, me and Sarah and Chris. So they need to be guided and imparted into this knowledge slowly by slowly to the time when we are into that period where things are quite hot. But finally, yes, whereas there are always mishaps, I want to say that our army as a nation has not been on the forefront of operations. It is always the police that takes the forefront, because the police's cardinal role is to protect people's lives and properties. However, where the police is at some point of a harem, there is no reason why the sister forces cannot come in to back up. Now, for the issue of the CDF, I really want to talk about. And
maybe before you go into the issue of the CDF, of course, this question is related to him. The fact that he has a force behind him. He has been propped as the chairman of PLU. That, of course, remains operational despite the fact that he was deployed, and that was halted in its tracks. But analysts say his influence, especially as we head into 2026 general election, is going to be very, very significant. And if his statements are anything to go by, the posturing is clear. Comment on that too.
Without doubt, the CDF's office and the CDF himself will be very pivotal in the coming election period. Why? Because it is a period where we anticipate a lot of happenings, including subversive individuals who would want to tamper with our security as a country. And therefore, the UPDF, headed by the CDF and Commander-in-Chief, the President, must be alert and prepared to ensure that Uganda's borders are secure. Now, to the statements, I doubt whether you have seen General Moses Kainerugaba posting on the official account of the office of the CDF. And let us not really deny the fact that, yes, he has not...
Kasim, which is the official account of the CDF on X?
You see, CDF is an office.
Yeah.
It's not a person. It is an office which has been exited by many and shall be exited by many in the future.
Including the general himself.
So there is the official account of the office of the CDF. And I doubt whether you have seen General Muhoozi Kainerugaba.
Sarah is showing you.
She's showing me the
no, just read the description for the viewers.
No, let me do that.
She's showing
please send me the phone.
What I know, because,
what you know.
Because I'm really an ardent admirer of General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, because there are things he speaks out which can't be spoken by everybody, and which are
including beheading people.
I didn't see that one, and therefore whatever is on this account, I can't verify it. Why? Because
it's a verified account.
I can't verify.
Chris, why don't you read?
I do not have the tools to verify accounts on Rex. Yes,
it's a verified account.
I don't have the tools to verify. It is like now saying verify land title, Chris.
No, Twitter has verified that account.
I'm not Twitter, I'm not Elon Musk, so I have to isolate myself from that. But moving forward, he has got his side of life. He has got his side of life as Muhoozi Kainerugaba.
That is right.
And therefore, there is nothing which stops him from speaking as Muhoozi Kainerugaba.
To behead the people. So
if he was speaking as CDF on the official account of CDF, we would begin holding him accountable. But this is an account which can be duplicated by anybody, and so I would not want to take the statement seriously.
Can you indulge me, Chris, briefly before he goes off?
No.
Just a question, a brief question.
Yeah.
The Muhoozi is a UPDF officer. True or false?
She's cross-examining me.
No.
Okay, I will answer that for you.
He is a soldier.
Muhoozi Kainerugaba
is a member of UPDF.
Is a serving soldier.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
The Constitution defines the character of the UPDF, not the character of a CDF. Because a CDF is just one of the members of UPDF. So to run away from whether this semantics of whether he's using official account or person, as a person he's supposed to conduct himself in accordance with Article 28 of the Constitution.
There are elements within the political class who say that his statements, like you opined earlier, are some communication that is coming through. He doesn't want the job, and he's been given...
Either he's unfit or he doesn't want the job.
Which is which?
He's secret.
No, let's not discuss whether he is unfit or doesn't want the job. No doubt, but his statements, I think now you've thrown a new spanner into the works, that accounts including X are not something that we can give attention to.
No, that's not true.
Why would we believe the president when he talks
that's not true
on X?
On X.
You see, when the president is communicating on X, he communicates on his official handle as the president of the Republic of Uganda.
It is also
true. It's also his personal account. It's his personal account.
Therefore, on the account of General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, who is the CDF, who has not communicated anything on the official account of the office of the CDF, I would have reservations on commenting about it. However, you cannot stop the public from giving opinions because Uganda is a democracy where you can give your opinion and you walk out of this studio unharmed.
Oh, interesting there. But X is X, and of course social media has all its challenges and dynamics. In the coming days, we shall be hoping that a little bit of clarity comes through on whether this particular account is of the general who is a soldier or the general who is the CDF, that is Chief of Defense Forces. It's time for a short break. We shall return and continue with the discussion and probably look at who could be lining themselves up to face the president as the opposition battles to dislodge the national resistance movement. Our eyes are on some individuals, including the Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs. Do stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm glad you're still with us on Morning at NTV. It's the Kickstarter, and we are looking at the political landscape ahead of 2026 general election. The election will be in January 2026, so please, if anybody thinks that all the action and the preparations will be in 2026, absolutely not. It's 2025 and it has begun in earnest. President Museveni on his own has been out and about talking about the need for communities and households to engage in productive agriculture. The opposition and many actors are saying he is effectively campaigning, while the rest who will be taking on positions in 2026 have not been allowed to start their campaigns in earnest. Is that a level playing field, or is the president pretty allowed to go on his work, because after all he is the incumbent? With me in the studio I have Kassim Kamugisha, he's the Deputy RCC Wakiso, and Sarah Birete, the Executive Director at the Center for Constitutional Government. We have governance rather. We have looked at a range of issues that define the political process, many of which you are acclimatized with, especially if you are a Ugandan, and might be well aware of how things are going to play out. Kassim Kamugisha says the state must be able to be on top of matters, especially with regard to security. Sarah Birete says it's going to be another confrontation. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as we enter the final bend of this particular program, the very first in 2025, if you were to measure the amount of hope, optimism that lies within the hearts of our politicians about the need to move ahead honestly for the good of the country, what would be the verdict in that particular sense? Do you see an opportunity for the political class to realign itself to the fundamental goals and aspirations of a country like Uganda? Let me begin with you, Sarah Birete, on that. Do we have a genuine
because
chance?
What is the political class? You see, the political class are not just political leaders.
Okay.
The political class includes the elite in the country. Where are the elite in this country? The elite are divided into two groups. You have the elite who have resigned on their active citizenry duty and are enjoying the spoils of power, or are keeping quiet because they want to benefit from the privileges of proximity to power, including deals, jobs, and other benefits. And those have let down the country. Because the elite in any democracy must be at the front line of advocating for good governance. So when you sell out that voice as the eyes of the society, and you settle for the spoils of power, whether you can have a job or a contract, then you have let down the country for individual gain. The other elite are trying to voice out their concerns in several groups there. Some are in the political parties, others are in the, the activists, saying, no, this is wrong, but with the situation of state capture. And data shows that any leader who overstays in power, you don't expect, for example, let me use the example of Cameroon and Paul Biya. Paul Biya is at 91, who stays in France, not Cameroon, and have Senai, who only visits his country, is promising on a campaign trail that is going to make lives better for Cameroonian. It's a promise that is laughable. Because at 91, how can you make lives better for people? So let me come away from age. Yeah. But of course he has overstayed. He's one of the longest serving leaders in Africa. So any leader who overstays in power, you cannot expect, for example, now NRM to deliver a better election than previous one. Statistics worldwide have shown that any leader who overstays in power, the situation can only get worse. Also, data from our elections from 1996, at the time after promulgation of the Constitution, to today, the best election we had was 1996. Every other election is worse than the previous. So I cannot predict a miracle on this show. If I follow data and the analytical reasoning, it will be worse than 2021.
There must be a lot more optimism from Kassim Kamugisha. you see the political class are finally realigning to the aspirations of the country, especially those that Sarah Birete accuses of being complicit on account of proximity to power?
Well, as earlier stated, when we are here, these are opinions, and we have entitlement. However, to strike the nail on the head, we have a lot of work to do as political parties, for example, because most of the politicians in the country, I don't want to classify. I want to take it as a general submission. Most of them emanate from political parties. But what is the procedure of having so and so flag a bear for a political party at a parliamentary level? Where has he gone through that level? If we look at a party like CPC of China, you can't even be a chairman LC1 before you have been vetted for over 10 years. In terms of understanding the aspiration of your country, in terms of understanding the correct ideology of your party, in terms of understanding what shall be your cardinal responsibilities.
As a leader.
As a leader. Here in Uganda and in Africa as a whole, we don't have bureaus in political parties which which identify, then nurture, then finally vet for political placements in the body politic or in administration.
That's quite elaborate.
And so it will be quite difficult for the politicians in Africa and in Uganda to correctly align with aspirations of our country, because where have they passed through to where they are? It comes as a wave. It picks Kassim Kamujisha the following days on the floor of Parliament. He has never had exposure in terms of political management anywhere. How do you expect him to fit and serve the aspirations of the country? It becomes quite tricky, and therefore we have to go back to the nurturing identification, nurturing, and therefore saying, Sarah, we agree that on this flag you are the capable, because where you have gone through, the grounding you have got, you are solid for the role. And when that is lacking, it becomes tricky to align the body politic with aspirations of our nation. Now, longevity in power and service delivery are two different things. I don't want to differentiate between monarchies and democracies, but there are monarchies where leaders have stayed for quite a longer time and they have delivered the best. I'll give a monarchy of Dubai. These, by 1976, they began on a journey, but they had studied what had retarded them for quite some time. As we speak today, Dubai is a hub of the whole world in tourism, in business. So you can't relate longevity with and progress of a nation. It all goes back to where was this country before. Now, when you look at a state like Uganda, by 1986, the state had collapsed completely. You take power and you have got rebel groups, for example, you have got insurgencies in the country, cutting off half of the country. Now, you have to sit down and begin realigning the security of the country, which takes you over 10 or 15 years. Now, when you get back after that 15 years, you begin looking at how our people can socio-economically progress. And so, in also aligning this one requires you 10, 15, 20 years. And so, we have to give credit where due, but also critique in a positive criticism that our country can move forward. Therefore, I believe that we have to go back on how to identify, nurture, then praise politicians, but also we separate service delivery with the time you spend in office. You can't tell me that the president of Kenya, who was there for 8 years, did wonders because it was a short time. Not really.
Interesting there.
Is yours improving or getting worse?
You know the statistics.
Okay. All right, we're going to have to wrap this up. And of course, the aspects of civic education and ensuring that Ugandans are engaged and aware of their responsibilities as voters is very important. How they are going to navigate the connotation of coin in the election is something that I'm waiting to see, because many right now are grappling with economic hardships, and anything that is thrown at them is one they will take. And whether it will shape their vote, it is not debatable. We know how things turn out. Your last word, Sarah Birete, on this.
Just on two issues. One is a reference to Dubai, you know, UAE, the United Arab Emirates, commonly called Dubai. Dubai was founded in UAE in 1971 as a federation of 6 emirates. So it's the country is just a few years old, around 54, as the United Arab Emirates, and it has actually demonstrated that you don't need 200 years to build a functional country, like the way NRM people usually refer to constitutionalism, that we need to wait for 200 years. Whatever method people choose to be governed under, it can be done and delivered in a short while. And as I conclude, I want to keep with the civic education messages that I opened the show with, and as I want to advocate for the full facilitation of the Electoral Commission to do its work. Normally the Electoral Commission...
It's a positive call.
Yes, normally the Electoral Commission, you know, battles with funding challenges. As a country, we know that every 5 years we are supposed to have elections. It's a constitutional duty. But you reach a time for implementing the roadmap, and the Electoral Commission is struggling to get funds. This is wrong. We need to give priority to the release of funds to Electoral Commission to implement their roadmap in a timely manner. Okay. Thank you.
Kamgisha, civic education in Kabale. Are the people aware of what is going to be happening in 2026?
It's a role of us collectively that we put at the forefront sensitization of the masses on their roles and responsibilities in the coming period. And for Kabale, of course, we shall do our best to ensure that people get to understand, to avoid crashes here and there. But my principal core is that Uganda is our country, and we are all mandated to ensure that our country survives until tomorrow for our children to find and our grandchildren. Therefore, let each one of us play his role unbiased for the survival of our country, Uganda, so that our children and grandchildren can find it. Not like other countries which are on the world map and have of today disappeared. You can't have Prussia, you can't have Yugoslavia, and many others. Let that not be fair to Uganda, because we are not understanding our responsibilities as a citizenry.
Okay, Kasim Kamgisha, Deputy RCC Wakiso, many thanks for the perspective, and many thanks to you too, Sarah Birete, Executive Director at the Center for Constitutional Governance. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Now, the head of Rotary International has been visiting, and he's here in the country for a 7-day period to explore various projects that are being undertaken in the country by Rotaractors. He has emphasized the president rather has emphasized that peace building and environmental conservation are key pillars in advancing the next humanitarian agenda in line with the works of Rotarians. My colleague Ivan K. Walinyolo has that story.